Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources.
I'm Kerry Fink with Helping Seniors Television. Welcome to this edition. Our effort here is Helping Seniors is all about helping you navigate your senior years in the best way possible, the most enjoyable way possible, the safest way possible, the healthiest way possible. And we talk a lot, as our president and founder, Joe Steckler, does, about developing your own aging plan, which is a tool that is so important to helping us navigate senior things. Here in Florida, we get a hurricane plan. It does not mean you want to have a hurricane. It means you want to have a plan so that you know what you would do and how you would react. That's the same idea behind an aging plan. We want to help you get together how you're going to respond to things that could come down the path as we get older. But not all of it is serious. Some of it is a lot of fun, and some of it is how you can best get information. So the whole role of helping seniors is to inform, educate, and connect you with resources that are going to make a difference as you navigate your senior path. One of the things that's really amazing is that we get to do a thing called a podcast. I'm smiling because I'm not sure that word even existed 20 years ago, but we have one of the nation's foremost authorities on podcasts in here in the studio with us. She is the head of Space Coast Podcasters Association. We're going to talk about some of the awards she's won along the way for podcasting. She's a coordinator for national podcast conferences, and she has actually helped us, Little Helping Seniors of Brevard, put together the very podcast studio that we are recording Helping Seniors Television in right now as we speak. So I'd love to welcome you to Jen Hardy with the fabulous Over 50 podcast. How you doing today?
Wow, I'm doing really good. You made me sound incredible. Thank you.
Well, you are. When you first got in contact with us and said, hey, I'm doing a podcast, it's called Fabulous Over 50, we were like all in on that because, you know, it's difficult getting older. We have so many challenges that we have to face each day, day in and day out. And I love the way that you kind of take the high road and keep the positive thing. Talk about the Fabulous Over 50 podcast, and how did you become a podcaster?
Well, it's an interesting story. I started a blog 10 years ago when blogging was the thing.
Right.
And it was for moms with health issues. And I did that for 8 years. And out of that came the podcast because there was a lot of moms that couldn't read the blog. They didn't feel good or whatever. And a podcast, you just push a button and you can listen. So even if you could lay there with your eyes closed and hear the podcast. But after doing the podcast for several years, honestly, it got a little bit depressing, talking about health and being sick and all that sort of thing. And I was at PodFest, a podcasting conference, and I looked around and I thought, what needs to be done? What is something missing? Because there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts. And I realized there needed really to be something for women over 50 that was fun and exciting. And I thought, this is it. And it was born right in that moment. And I went home, changed everything to Fabulous Over 50, and I haven't looked back. And it's been a really fun ride.
You know, I want to ask you about this because, you know, for myself, back in our corporate days, I was what they would call a radio guy because I grew up in the radio business and had a lot of that. And so my background was media. And I don't want to make the assumption that people know even what a podcast is. Most of us, if we're in our senior years, we do understand and recall radio. Talk about what a podcast is.
So that is so important for people to know. And I feel like, especially in our older population, a lot of people don't know, and it can open the door to incredible entertainment. So a podcast, if you think about it like an old-fashioned radio show, right? Except it's like the Wild West out there. So, you know, you hear about social media and different platforms not letting people say what they want to say about certain topics. But podcasting, you can talk about anything. So if somebody's into a political thing, but we don't need to really go into that. But let's say they're into horses or dogs or fashion or senior care or whatever, they can find a podcast for that and listen. They can find dozens of podcasts for that. and it's so much fun. So there are podcast players. There's iHeartRadio and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. People may have heard of those. For my podcast, I also play it on my website. So if somebody goes to my website, they can easily find it and play right there. They can find the topic that they want and play it. So they're everywhere.
Yeah, I wanted to make that comment. In the Helping Seniors world, our whole reason to be as a 501c3, 100% local to Brevard nonprofit is we're trying to put education and information in the hands of seniors and their families that are going to make a difference. So for years, from the day that Joe Steckler, our president and founder, began helping seniors, we're now into our 14th year of service, he said, I want to do the same thing I used to do when I was building up Brevard Alzheimer's. He said, I want to do radio, and I want to do television, and I want to do print. And he said, in particular, I want to do the radio because I want people to know what's going on in the community, where they can find the resources they need to. And so we have been doing radio continuously since literally the day that Joe began helping seniors. And we do a live radio show every week on helping seniors. But some time back, we said, we're hearing from people that they tuned in late to the show. Maybe they were really engaged in the show and said, boy, I know who really needs to hear this show. This would really benefit them, the topic you're talking about. So we made the decision a while back that every time we do a radio show, even though we still all go to the studio, we do it live, and it's out there on the radio. Two things: people listen on the air, and some people just call it, I guess it's called streaming, when you are listening to it live as it's happening. But we make sure we put those broadcasts back out in the podcast world for just that reason. People will say, oh, I know my aunt so-and-so could really benefit because she's got this problem, and that's exactly what you guys are talking about. Isn't that a way podcasts are beneficial?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the great thing. You can share it with everybody and they can listen. And another great thing is that anybody can do a podcast.
Yes.
So that's the incredible thing. So if you're an expert in something, and even if you don't have equipment, there's a lot of people that have popular shows that started on their cell phone. They just recorded it into their cell phone, and it's really incredible. So it's a great way to share any kind of information with the whole world.
I love what you said about the fact that you were a blogger first, because I do remember that phase of the internet where everybody would type things. And, we're such a busy generation typically that, I think a lot of people will even take a book. Instead of reading it, they'll listen to a book, through an online service or something, because that way we can, I always used to say this in the radio business. When you're watching a TV show or you're reading a magazine or looking at a newspaper or whatever, it's hard to multitask when you do that. But when you're listening to something, that's really the perfect thing. You can be washing the dishes, cleaning your house, you have your headphones on or your earbuds in, and you can keep moving with whatever you're doing and still be getting great information and entertainment at the same time. And so with the podcasting world, the world's at your fingertips, right? Because you can find a podcast probably about almost any topic that you would think through. And then particularly for the senior world, like we were talking about in our world, where we're trying to get information in the hands of people, we find it's a really good tool, because people can find it everywhere they find podcasts. They just look up Helping Seniors Radio, whether it's on Apple iTunes or like you said, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You find the same thing, I'm sure, in your fabulous Over 50 podcast.
Absolutely. And what's nice is, people like to binge a lot now.
Yeah.
So if someone finds Helping Seniors and they think, oh, this is a great episode, if they're listening on the radio, when it's over, it's over. But if you're listening on the podcast, you can hit play on the next episode and just keep going as long as you want to, which is nice.
Yeah, I thought about that because a lot of times in the radio program, if we have more than one guest, sometimes we'll say, okay, let's cover this topic first, and then we'll come back on the second half of the show and we'll cover this. And again, it occurs to me that we've had people say, well, I just tuned in, but I really wanted to hear what they were talking about. And now you can go back and pull it out. You can listen to it again. Maybe there was some notes you wanted to take. You were driving the first time you heard it, but you said, that was really good. I need to write some of this down. So many things you can do with podcasts. One of the things that I think is amazing is not only are you a podcaster yourself with a successful Fabulous Over 50 podcast, but you make it a point to help other podcasters excel. You have a whole program called the Space Coast Podcasters. Talk a little bit about your work in all of that.
So we love podcasting. Our family is a podcasting family. My husband's my producer. My son has his own show, and we just love it. We love the podcasting community. And when we lived in Nashville, I was part of their podcasting group.
Yeah.
And we didn't find anything like that here. And so we started it because that's just what we do, right?
Yeah.
And so we started it, and it's been so wonderful. And the best part lately has been we've been able to come here.
Yeah.
And we've been able to meet here. This is an incredible place. But people from Orlando all the way to the coast come and they join us. We've got some people who haven't started yet. We've got some people who are professionals, and the speakers we've been able to get, because I know people in the podcasting world, we've got some of the best podcasters from the United States that will come, or occasionally we do virtually bring them in. And so there's benefit for everybody. It works out really nice.
Yeah, I think you guys meet once a month. Is that right?
Once a month, the second Tuesday.
Okay, so second Tuesday a month. Now, there's a website or a Facebook page that people can look at?
There is. SpaceCoastPodcasters.com is us. And we're also on Facebook. And nowhere else, because I'm not great at social, but that's where we are. But everything's on the website. You can buy the tickets. It's $10, but you get dinner and drinks and an incredible speaker, and you get to meet some incredible podcasters.
And I wanted to ask you about that because I was going to say, who should attend these meetings? Who is the right person that you would want to, would say they're really going to benefit from coming out here?
Well, that's interesting. You should ask. Because we are about to expand it to podcasters and creators.
Oh.
Because there's a lot of people doing video, and podcasting now is overlapping with video, which is a whole story for another day. But anybody who's interested in any sort of podcasting or recording or even video, because like I said, it's overlapping now. So some of our speakers do both. I do both. And so you'll learn about all kinds of things. And maybe you're not even ready. Maybe you think one day I might want to start a podcast. Then definitely come join us.
You know, I was going to say that because as I mentioned earlier in the show, you know, I come from an era where I was a radio guy. And back in those days, people were, you know, print people, they were radio people, they were TV people, they were related to whatever specific media. And one of the advantages that we have now in the wonderful opportunities we have with the internet being, you know, everybody's walking around with a smartphone and all these things, is that all those medias have kind of come together. Because like you mentioned, you're really a content provider at this point, right? Because sometimes it's audio, sometimes it's video, occasionally there's some written text that goes with it, but it's really all of the above.
Absolutely. And speaking of written text, I know for my podcast and a lot of other podcasters, we get the transcript for our podcast. And so on my website, if somebody is hard of hearing or can't listen, there's a transcript for the entire episode for every episode. So they can still know what was inside the episode without having to listen.
Talk a little bit about, you've gotten some major awards and you've been involved in some national conferences. Talk a little bit about all that.
So I was very excited in January to get a podcast of the year, and now I'm up for two others.
Wow.
And one is Women in Podcasting, and the other is, that's not for Podcast of the Year completely. It's in the leisure category, as is the People's Choice Awards, which is very humbling. I got shortlisted for that, so the show will actually be announced at the awards show, which is, it's very exciting. And then I also am up for Broadcast of the Year for my YouTube show, which is also something for the other day. But it's been a really good year. It's been 10 years in the making, but it's coming together in 2024.
And talk a little bit about your work with the conferences and things like that. You've been very instrumental in organizing some national level conferences in addition to the work that you do with the Space Coast Podcasters.
So PodFest is my favorite podcasting conference. The head of it, Chris Kremitzos, founded it 10 years ago. Uh-huh. This is going to be our 11th in January.
Wow.
And I've attended 6 of them. And I started attending as a volunteer and loved it. I fell in love with it. And so now my husband, Dave, and I are the volunteer coordinators for PodFest. So any volunteer that comes and anything that's done behind the scenes, that's what we do. And it's so much fun. And if people want to come to PodFest, it would be anybody, just like our meetings. If you're thinking about it, if you've started it, if you're not sure if you want to start, or if you're a pro, you're welcome to come, and we can get you tickets if you volunteer. So there's a little bonus there for people that come help.
How neat. So, one of the things that I love about what you're saying is, a lot of times when we're busy with our careers during our working years, we become, we have our hobbies, we have the things that we like to engage in when we have time. And oftentimes, when we can put aside our career work and say, okay, I've done that, I want to enjoy my golden years, I'm going to be fabulous over 50, however we want to put it, it gives you an opportunity to explore some of the creative things and some of the wisdom maybe that you've accumulated over the years. I often say this, in business world, when you are promoted, you often become a senior. Like, you're the senior vice president, you're the senior analyst, you're the senior whatever. And it's to connote that you have experience that goes. And so we should listen to you because you're not the junior, you're not even the regular, you are the senior. And that really should be more the way we think about our seniors when it comes to terms of experience, right? They just have more trips around the sun, so they have more experience, more wisdom to share, more expertise in certain areas. And that's really the heart of the podcast. Maybe people are at a time where I said, I've always loved this area. Who knows, gardening. I've always loved this area. I'm an expert on ecology. Whatever that thing is that has driven you your whole life, maybe the podcast is a world for you to open up.
Absolutely. And it's funny you should say that because I have another group called the Golden Mike Society.
Yes.
And that is for podcasters over 50.
Yes.
Because we're a unique animal. Things are changing. Vocabulary is changing. The way things are done is changing. And so a group of us got together at PodFest and we decided, it'd be fun if we had this group. And we meet every Tuesday in the afternoon. And one of the fantastic things that's come out of that is that there are people, because you can come in as a beginner if you want to, or you're just interested.
Yeah.
And so there are some people who have retired and they have so much knowledge about specific things, and they can use their podcast to educate the next generation, which has been really interesting to watch. And especially people who in the beginning, they say, oh, I don't like my voice, or who am I, right? Who am I to do this thing? Why should I do it? And their family might say, oh, mom or dad, what are you thinking? But they get out there and they record a couple episodes and then they get the feedback. Wow, thank you so much for sharing what you knew. And that's it. Then it just takes off. And it's really beautiful to watch.
I love it. The Golden Mike Society. Let me ask you this question about that. If you're a person, and maybe just as we're talking our way through it, and somebody's now sparked with the idea, said, well, I would love to share my experience about this. Is it expensive to start a podcast? How does somebody even go about such a thing?
So people ask me that all the time. And what I say is, don't spend any money when you first start.
Okay.
Do not spend any money. Like I said, you can just use your phone. And the first couple of episodes, that's what I recommend. Now, other people are going to tell you different things. There are some inexpensive microphones. And if you really want to, I can recommend those to people. But most podcasters do something called pod fade, which is where you stop podcasting after the third episode or within the third episode. So what I like to do is encourage people to get started, get a couple out there. And if you like it and you're going to continue, then we can help you find some affordable equipment, or you could just keep doing it through your phone. Another great thing that's been happening over the last few years is that people want to see real. There's so many Photoshop and fake and filters and all these things that people would actually rather hear you as you than some over-edited someone else. And so it's really nice because it makes it so that the door is open for everyone.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, because really another hat you wear, you are really on the cutting edge of everything. You understand what's going on. You teach classes about AI. And so you have that, but I'm really intrigued with what you said about how the authenticity of the real is like things get more like, is that real? Is that fake? There is something about coming home to just, let's have a conversation. That's a very good point.
Exactly. Thank you. And I mean, you don't want to be outside while the lawnmower's going or, things like that. But if you're in a quiet place in your house, you can really make it happen.
So I guess if somebody says, well, I have a hankering, I would like to dabble in this and see if this is the thing for me. I love what you're talking about because it doesn't require a big investment. You can kind of just get started. But I guess the thing is we still have to know how to get off and running in the right way. But I would assume that you're going to tell me that's exactly what Space Coast Podcasters is designed to help us do, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. You come to a meeting and you're going to learn the things that you need to learn, and you're going to get the contact information for me and for other people who can help walk you through it. I actually have somebody I met at a local department store, and I was buying a glittery belt, and she was like, "Why would you buy, nobody?" And I said, for my show. And so we talked about it. She said, "I've been wanting to start." So she's coming to my house for a few hours, and I'm going to walk her through it. So yeah, we're definitely here and available for people to get started.
And so it's such an important thing because, some of the greatest artwork, some of the greatest things can all happen when we're able to kind of tap into that creative part. And I got to say, I don't know if it's scientific, but I sure believe it, that the more active and engaged and using your mind and tackling some new things and gaining some new skills, that's part of what keeps us going and gives us a purpose. And I would think the podcasting for seniors really has a lot just in all of that too.
Oh, absolutely. Because, people retire and they picture retiring and sitting and putting their feet up. But after a few weeks of that, it gets really tiring. My husband retired for the first time at 47 and realized very quickly that was not fun. And the more people I talk to, when they aren't active, if you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah.
And so it gives you a purpose. And the community is so incredible, the podcasting community. There is a place for everyone. And so there are some places where if you're a senior, you might feel like you don't belong, and people might make you feel, and that's rough. And that's another reason I have the podcast, because I think that's very wrong.
Yeah.
But we will welcome you with open arms.
Well, it's so important to explore all of these things, and it's so wonderful. We talk so much about the importance of having good local information. And one of the things that I love about us being able to do what we do in the Helping Seniors world is that when we put together our podcasts, radio podcasts and things like that, it's designed for our local community, but we will find out, because they call it the World Wide Web, it's available, and we'll get calls from people from all over the world who find something that we've talked about important. A real life example, and I love to share this one, is there's a lady who is local who's very much an expert about reverse mortgages. And a lot of times, we'll get information from TV, and I'm not passing judgment on the quality of it, but somebody will see an 800 number with some famous person that they respected from a TV show in the 70s, and they'll call that 800 number to get information. And we always say that could be fine or it could not be fine. Wouldn't it be a whole lot better to sit down with somebody who's local? You can sit across the table from them eye to eye and say, "I'm interested in a reverse mortgage. Tell me what I need to know, what I need to be aware of, what I need to be afraid of," all those kind of things. Find somebody local. Well, so in this particular genre, one of the ladies who's very, very experienced in reverse mortgages locally gets a call from somebody who says, "I'm watching you right now." And at first she was like, "That sounds a little bit odd." And then he said, "No, I'm watching what you're talking about right now." And now she's like, "Okay, what is it, mister?" And it turns out he was a person in California who had found her podcast, or well, in this case, it was actually a Helping Seniors TV show, but it found it on the YouTube channel. And he said, "I like the way you broke this information down. I'm trying to figure out if this is the right move for me." So she had to explain, "I'm licensed in Florida. I'm not licensed in California." And he goes, but would you at least, am I asking the right questions? So she took the time to go through that. But that's my point, is you might be doing this locally because you're part of a local network or something like that, and all of a sudden you're going to surprise yourself. You're having an impact all over the world. I guess you see that in the Fabulous Over 50 podcast yourself.
I do. We've got listeners all over the world. It's really incredible.
Yeah. I joke about that because there's some of the projects we do. I go, wow, we're getting to converse with people that we may never have that opportunity on this side of things to maybe meet them because they're in a foreign country and we're in, where we are. But it's neat that we can literally communicate globally through this whole thing with the podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's people in other countries that maybe can't ask the questions, and then you can give them answers to things they never would have had the answers to, which I've found in my podcast. It's been really nice.
Oh, it's so good. So let me try to sum this up. If you're a listener and you want to find the Fabulous Over 50 podcast, just because you want to hear this whole great media empire and thing that you've built. And I love the fact that it's positive because, there are a lot of challenges seniors have. So let's look on, is the glass half empty or glass half full? It's definitely, it's going to be much better if you look at it glass half full. How do people find the podcast?
So they can go to, like I said, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or they can go to my website, jenhardy.net. Everything I do is there.
Yeah, I love that. So that's a good thing to write down, jenhardy.net, because I assume that may be also a resource that we want to keep in mind if we're interested in maybe getting into our own podcast. Don't you have information about the Golden Mike Society?
I do. Golden Mike Society, Space Coast Podcasters, everything is just in that one spot to make it easy.
So jenhardy.net. So I want to say to you, viewer, that I hope you've enjoyed the conversation that we've been having with Jen Hardy of Fabulous Over 50 Podcast, Space Coast Podcasters, as well as award-winning podcaster herself. I think there's so much value you bring. Like I said, even in the room that we're sitting in, you helped put this look together so that we could, as a small nonprofit, be competing on kind of a world stage so that at least that we look good and hopefully we're sounding good in terms of the information that we're providing. So I want to thank you for that. One more time, it's jenhardy.net, right?
jenhardy.net. And thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Well, thank you for joining us. And on behalf of Joe Steckler, our president and founder, thank you for taking the time to invest some of your time in helping seniors. There's a world of resources there, helpingseniors.brevard.org. It's a great website for you to know about. You can find information on everything that happens here from the Senior Resource Center, which is right where our worldwide headquarters for podcasting is, right here in Melbourne, Florida. So that's the time we have for today. And thank you for joining us for Helping Seniors TV.
I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses, and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniors.brevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.